Hi Chris, how are you?
Good evening, Rod. I'm well on this very damp day. I don't know about you, but it smells very fresh in my garden coming to my shed.
I don't know about fresh, it smells very wet to me. Everything is, absolutely soaked outside there.
No, but you know that fresh smell you get when you've had loads of rain? That's what my garden, and I didn't walk very far, but that's what it smells like on the way to my shed that's halfway down my garden.
I just need to walk into this room. I don't need to go down the garden path, so I suspect I have a different thing. I cooked dinner before I came in. A nice smell of mushroom pasta.
Ooh, that sounds good. I'm not eating dinner, so I'm absolutely starving because I haven't eaten since lunchtime, and I won't eat till tomorrow breakfast.
You're doing a fasting thing, aren't you?
Yeah, I do an intermittent fasting thing. I've been doing it on and off for a while, so I'm back in the mood to do it. I try and do it when I'm in the mood, because if you're in the mood to do it, that's half the battle. If you're not in the mood, then it's challenging. So I just do that from time to time. It's going to be good for you to fast and let your body regenerate. So I try and do that. And obviously most regeneration is while I'm in bed, which is the best time because then I can't feel the hunger pain.
Yeah, I did do that for a little bit. I did the skip a day entirely thing, eat 4 days a week, or eat 5 days a week, and then 2 days you just didn't eat at all. And I was licking plates with anything on them by the end of it. So
you didn't need a dishwasher.
I definitely did the dishwasher. The dog would look at me like I was mental. So
yeah, I haven't quite got to that stage yet, but I'm not going to full 24 hours. I'm kind of just doing 18, 20 hours. It just depends what I'm in the mood for. So not too hard and fast, but better than doing nothing.
Fair enough. Do you want to tell us what episode this is?
So we are episode 129. It's the 15th of July, and we're going to get straight into some follow-up.
We are. And the first piece is with me. My app of the week last week was the Affinity suite of apps, photo publisher and designer. It was a good deal to upgrade them. Did you upgrade them?
Do you know what I did? It was £60 or $59.99 here in the UK. I went and upgraded them. I think I'd only bought one before. I think I'd bought all three, but it said I qualified. So I went and bought all three because they are really good on the iPad. They're on the Mac as well. They're just great apps. And £60 is not a lot of money for that caliber of app. And for what I do, I'm very happy with that.
It's really not, and to really sort of sweeten the deal for anybody who hasn't tried them yet is they're now free for 6 months, so that's quite a trial you get to try them for, and they're even free for 6 months if you've tried them at some point in the past. So up to the point you started the trial, if you tried them and not opted in, they'll now give you another trial for 6 months, which is terrific, really. And thank you, well done, Sarif, or the people who own or release the Affinity Designer Suite. Take it to Adobe. I mean, we've all decided Adobe are pretty much evil, as we do with all big corporations on this podcast. They're pretty much evil, so are Adobe, and I think this was a great job by Sarif.
I think it is really good. I've been put off Adobe for a long time, I think, just because it was, for what I do, I nip in every now and again and tweak a photo or make a poster. I think for me, Adobe was a bit overkill. Where I'm happy to spend some money, just not all the money. So I think these are a great balance for people.
Yeah, I mean, I think for most people, Adobe apps work out £22 a month, even with a student account, which is quite a lot. To be fair, it's a lot of apps for the money, although, as we talked about before, all your content lives inside Adobe's Creative Cloud rather than their Creative Suite that they used to have. You'd very quickly make your 60-odd quid back.
Yep.
If all you use is Photoshop. Yeah.
100%.
So there you go. Check them out if you haven't already. You've got even more reason to do so in a 6-month free trial, even though you don't spend the money. Next story, Vision Pro has released in the UK. Woo, have you been to try it out yet?
No, I haven't. I haven't had any need to go to London or really any city, so I've kind of avoided it. I'm probably not going to do it for a few weeks because I'm on holiday soon. I do want to try it, but I don't know anybody that's ordered it. I haven't seen any buzz. I don't know about you. Do you know anybody that's got one?
No, the only things I did see was on Mastodon. A couple of people who'd gone to America to buy them had flipped over to the UK App Store rather than their iCloud accounts being limited to the US one, and that was just 2 people. I didn't see anybody going to buy one, and reading in the newspapers about sort of, used to get lines at Apple stores when things would release, there was 1 person in the Oxford Street queue for it.
I think you mean Regent Street, but that is bonkers.
That is what I mean, and yes, it is.
It's just, I think it's too much money, and I think there's some cool potential use cases, but I've heard a lot of developers saying, I bought it, I thought it was amazing, but I haven't really used it in 4 weeks, and it's just, I don't know. I really want to try it. I can see me buying one in the future, but not right now, not at that price, I think. That's why I bought my iPad, which was nearly as expensive, but I know I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it every day, and I'm going to get a lot of value for it. So I
Well,
think it will come, but it feels like it's taken a long time for them to get the cost down. They are struggling, aren't they?
though, well, they're not bringing the cost down, are they? And it's interesting. So there's two stories in the show notes. The first one is a 95 Mac feature with Tim Cook. Apparently, Tim Cook was speaking to The Sun, which is sort of the primary link for this. Well done, Tim Cook. That's quality journalism you're following there. Apparently, what he mostly uses it for is entertainment. So he's watching films on it, he's watching sports on it. What he's not using it for is spatial computing.
And he's not to pony up the $3,500 to buy it because he probably got one for free as he works there.
Well, I think he's probably got more than one. He's probably got one for his house, and one for his private jet, and one for his whatever else.
You would have, though, wouldn't you? But I guess then you've got the pain of keeping them up to date. But it's great he's using that, but you kind of want to hear from the guy who's introduced this device to the world that he's using it all the time, and it's amazing. He can't live without it.
Yeah, not just that he's taken in the odd movie with it. Probably when he's a busy man. Let's face it, he's got a lot to do. But yeah, it's not a great sales job for it, really, is it?
No, they shouldn't have him to talk about any form of product. I think that's not his forte, is it?
I don't mind him talking about it. He's the CEO of the company. He should eat his own dog food, and fair enough. But you'd be very upset if you rocked up with some Dell laptop, wouldn't you?
But he's just, yeah, agreed, you would be, but he's not a product person. I think that's the thing. He never seems that enthusiastic, like genuinely enthusiastic about a really nicely made product. And it does look a lovely made thing. But no, as soon as I go and try it, I will let you know. Are you going to be nipping down to Cardiff?
I'm in no great rush to go and see it. If I intersect with an Apple store, I will do. And just to finish off our thought before I sort of expand on that, is that the second story is from Ars Technica, and new app releases for the Apple Vision Pro have fallen dramatically since launch. Apple's struggling to attract content for its $3,500 headset and 3,200 quid, I think it is. There's less than 2,000 apps apparently on the Vision Pro at the moment, which is when you consider there's 20,000 apps created for the iPad in a sort of similar space of time. That really sort of shows the span or the reach that the Apple Pro is failing to have.
I think it's not helped that Apple haven't even got their apps there, first-party apps. There was no new additional first-party apps announced as part of Vision OS 2, whereas you thought they'd be chipping them off, like every release, right, get one more app, just get one more app over the line so it's native on Vision OS, just to show we're committed to it. And it's frustrating they're not even doing that. It feels like Watch OS 1 all over again.
But if you go back to Tim's comments about it being an amazing entertainment device, you've only really got Disney and Apple TV Plus content on there. There's no Netflix, there's no Amazon Prime. There's only YouTube by a third-party developer has done something. And he said he made his money back in the first weekend for going to America to buy the device. But well done, you made $3,500. There was a time when the iOS App Store launched and the iPad App Store launched, you'd make an awful lot more than $3,500. We've seen other developers say that they're almost in the single dollar digits most weeks for any apps they've released in the Apple Vision Pro. This feels like a perfect storm to me. If you haven't got people queuing up, you haven't got the developers making it, you're not attracting the big companies to do this either. Unless something dramatic happens, it's DOA.
I think it will come. I think it will come over time. I think Apple will keep chipping away like they did with the watch, with the phone, with the iPad, and they will get there, but it will take time. But I think the problem is people have got too many devices in their life already, and you've got to slot now in another device. And do we need another device that runs another subset of apps? And I think that is the problem.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with you, but there we go, more Vision Pro stuff. In slightly better news for Apple, I'm actually doing something that we'd probably agree with that they should be doing in many other aspects of the company. The EC has stopped its investigation into Apple's locking down of the NFC chip on the iPhone. So this is an official press release from the EU saying they're going to stop antitrust investigations into Apple for locking down the payment chip on the iPhone. This is good. This is what Apple should be doing in many, many, many other walks of life. So well done. And that's surely what Apple want to see, is the EC going, yep, you did what we asked you to, and they step away from any sort of legislation.
Agreed. Big tick one on Apple. You've done the right thing. Can you do that everywhere else, please?
Yep. So what they've agreed is to allow third-party wallet providers access to the NFC chip, to provide fair, objective and transparent non-discriminatory procedures and eligibility criteria to grant NFC access, easy to set things up, easy to establish monitoring mechanisms, and to apply this to all third-party mobile app developers established in the EEA. We'll see if that last bit comes to pass, but good. Tick. Move on, I think.
Agreed.
Excellent. Next story. Microsoft has also managed to avoid something with the EU, although this feels a little different to me. So we talked about this story on the podcast a couple of months back about Microsoft abusing its position as a cloud provider with Azure services and cranking up its prices and locking people into those contracts because they were Microsoft customers. Apparently they've paid a bunch of money to other providers to get away from this, which seems like the most Microsoft thing in the world to do.
It's like big company thing to do, isn't it? Can I pay some money and this problem just go away? Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, it doesn't feel very straightforward. I mean, Apple have done the right thing in regards to the law and changed the way they're practicing in this one instance. They won't do it in others. Microsoft have done, as you say, the Microsoft thing and thrown money at the problem.
Yeah, it's Microsoft's way of working, though, isn't it? But I'm sure Apple would have done the same if it could have done.
There is still a sort of timeline on this. They've still got 9 months to make sure that their Azure stack is available for other products at fair prices. So they've just paused the problem, but I suspect they'll just chuck more money at it should it come to that, and they haven't done anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Again, Microsoft's way. Can I throw more money at it?
Yep. Immediately after we recorded last week, we had featured a story where Phil Schiller was going to sit on OpenAI board in a non-voting capacity, but just sort of as an observer. Microsoft were in a similar position. Literally 5 minutes after I posted the podcast, I think the news story broke that Phil Schiller wasn't going to do that, and indeed Microsoft were walking away from it as well. This seems to be to do with big tech being in big tech's pocket as much as anything else. They didn't like the optics of sitting on another tech bros board, for want of a better thing, when it's your closest partner for both Apple potentially and for Microsoft now. When you think of it in that light, yeah, that's a bit creepy, isn't it? Just let's like I hesitate to use the term, but it's a bit like a circle jerk.
A circle jerk.
Yeah, let's just skip over that. It will lose a clean tag if I have to explain it.
Understood. Yeah, it made sense for Apple to be on the board if Microsoft were on the board. But now what's going to happen is they're going to have regular stakeholder meetings to share progress with, I guess, Microsoft, Apple, maybe Google one day if Google or Android get involved. Obviously, they've got their own flavor of AI machine. So it's just weird that they announced it all and then they've backtracked it pretty quickly. But it probably does make sense that they have more of a stakeholder engagement forum. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a really big board of people, half that aren't observers and half that are. So I guess this makes sense longer term, but it's just odd how it was announced and then walked back relatively quickly.
Yeah, almost immediately. There's a paragraph that's worth reading in this Verge article. The changes to OpenAI's board come as antitrust concerns over Microsoft's deal with OpenAI have grown in recent months. UK regulators started seeking views on Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI in December, shortly after the turmoil that the ousting of CEO Sam Altman and his return. EU regulators are also looking into the partnership alongside other big tech AI deals. The FTC is also investigating Microsoft, Amazon and Google investments into OpenAI and Anthropic. So, yeah, this is all a bit inside baseball.
Yeah, agreed. There's still a lot happening in AI. This kind of echoes where we are generally with AI and adoption. It's just a fast-moving place at the moment.
Yeah, we've got a story about OpenAI in the main part as well that isn't follow-up. So, yeah. Do you want to tell us about iPlayer and tvOS?
Yeah, so a while ago we spoke about iPlayer. You were telling me that the quality is not as good. I should use the app on my TV, not the app on the Apple TV. Too many TVs in there. And actually, I noticed over the weekend watching Wimbledon and the Euros, I was like, I think the coverage is a lot sharper. And I've gone and checked on my LG TV and it's coming back and saying it's transmitting at 4K now. I certainly feel the picture quality is a lot better, but I can't seem to find any release notes from BBC iPlayer and tvOS. So hopefully it's better, but it certainly feels like it as a viewer. So thumbs up from me, because that's how I watch BBC.
I hope it's right. I bemoan the fact that there's no 4K content, or there was no 4K content on iPlayer, because they produce an awful lot of really good looking stuff that I'd like to watch in 4K. I don't want to use my TV's rubbish app particularly. I'd rather use my Apple TV. It's what I got an Apple TV for, so I hope this is right.
Yep, completely there. So fingers crossed it's all sorted, but like I say, to me and my eyes looked amazing, so very happy.
Shall we do some news?
Let's get into the news.
So this is an interesting story, really. There's been a lot of history of Intel chips having problems, and there was the security breach, the name of which completely escapes me, that affects all x86 based processors. It was called Whisper or Ghost or something like that. It was something sort of fairly spooky sounding.
I apologise, I can't remember, but I do know what you're talking about.
You're blanking as well. But this is their newest generations of chips, their 13th and 14th generations of chips. A developer, Alderon Games, isn't that a Star Wars reference, are showing a nearly 100% failure rate for certain Intel CPUs of this 13th and 14th generation in the i9 and I think the i7 category of Intel's chips. So 100% failure rate for a game developer who obviously push processors pretty hard. But the CPU isn't the whole story these days. There's GPUs as well. There's motherboard manufacturers. There's drivers. All the rest of it. But them complaining that they're experiencing 100% failure rate over time, and they're corrupting their SSDs and memories on their systems as well, is one hell of a thing to claim.
It's not a good look, is it? Because people are already leaving Intel for ARM-based processors. Now you've got this. And this games company are swapping 13th and 14th gen-based servers for AMD and urges other hosted the game servers to do the same. So it's not good, is it? It's just more fuel on the Intel fire.
It's as bad as it could possibly be, because one thing Intel have still got is a performance improvement over AMD. If you buy an i9 processor at a high clock speed or one you can overclock yourself, you're in it for games, or you're in it for some sort of research-based AI, sharing with your GPU. 100% failure rate on the most expensive chips in the line that could also take out your SSD with you is just horrendous. Why would you buy an high-end Intel chip for this? I know there's more and more interest, as you've said, about ARM chips at the lower end of the market. I think in the i3 and some other Celeron, what was Celeron, but is now an N100 or N200. I think they're very sort of power sipping, and they seem to be quite well received by the market. But at the high end, Intel have owned it, and if this is happening, and it's not just these developers of Warframe, another computer game, have also written they've had almost all crashes came from driver failures in 13th and 14th gen Intel processors. Real problem, this.
Yeah, it's not good at all, is it? Like the last bit Intel's been clinging on to could be prized out of their hand. I find it painful because Intel's like company. I always wanted an Intel chip when I was a kid, and I could only afford the AMD one. And now here we are. Actually, you want the AMD one now. The Intel one's no good.
I think that's been the way for a while, though. Like I say, at the absolute top end, they've owned the gaming market. But AMD have been eating their lunch there for a little bit of time. And certainly from a quality and cost point, AMD had it. And both of these big companies, x86 companies, are worried about how ARM and ARM-based chips are coming along and are about to sort of steal a lot of the march of them, particularly at the battery end of the market. But this could be the death knell for Intel. If this is an actual thing and it's not just unfortunate that a couple of games developers have seen it, if big server farms start seeing this, although they're more likely using Xeons, but if it affects the highest end x86 chips, maybe it's affecting the Xeons as well, and then that's a world of hurt for Intel.
Yeah, or even if people that are considering purchasing new servers, they see this and then they'll be like, well, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm not going to go Intel. I might as well go and buy AMD just to be on the safe side. So it's a tough marketing one for them to get around.
It's difficult, and there'll be people who'll just replace it because they've been Intel all the time or they've aspired to Intel. But as you say, it's sad for a company that has been at the pinnacle of pushing the PC forward for such a long time. I think, did Moore's Law come from Intel or was it IBM? I can't remember.
I think it's Intel. Or was it IBM?
There could be some real-time follow-up going on while I'll let you look into that while we go on. So Moore's Law is processing power will double roughly every 18 months, and that's held fairly true for quite a long time. We're sort of reaching the limits of nanometers, and you can always go down to a scale lower than that. But they've really pushed development of PCs forward.
He was co-founder of Intel.
There you go. So the company that's that phrase and has pushed along all this time has now got such horrendous problems. They're having failure rates of their processors, and they're affecting other components in computer for two companies, to be very, very clear. But yeah, poor show if this is true.
Should we circle back to OpenAI?
Yeah, tell us about OpenAI.
So OpenAI reportedly nears breakthrough with reasoning AI. So it's quite an interesting article. I don't know if you read it from ours, but they've now come up with there's going to be 5 levels, which I hadn't really read about before. So level 1 being chatbots, and that's the level we're in today. And then they think they're close to level 2, which will be reasoners, so human level problem solving. Then level 3 will be agents, systems that can take actions. Level 4 will be innovators, AI that can aid in invention. And level 5 will be organizations, AI that can do the work of an organization. So really interesting that they think they're going to be breaching level 2 quite soon. This kind of reminds me a bit of self-driving cars, the different tiers you've got there. And we never seem to get to the end one. What do you think about this?
Level 2 I find quite frightening. A level 2 AI system would reportedly be capable of basic problem solving on par with a human who holds a doctorate degree. That puts me out of a job.
It sails straight past me because I do not have a doctorate.
This feels like quite a reach to me, to go from something that hallucinates and predicts the next word that's coming next to go to human level problem solving.
Yeah, part of me wonders, should we not just try and finish level 1 first before we move on to level 2? It's like playing a game, isn't it? You've 80% level 1. Why don't we go back and do the last 20%, which is really hard, and get it right? But it's a big problem with a lot of tech, I think, at the moment. Nothing ever gets finished. It's always on to the next thing. So yeah, it's a bit worrying they think they're close to this one. OpenAI seem to be just moving on to the next thing all the time and not tidying up the wake they've left behind them.
If you think of them as a traditional software firm, you look at something like, let's take Apple, we know a lot about them, who haven't fixed bugs in the operating system going back to, was it System MD, or what was the daemon that ran in the background that screwed up in networking and all manner of things? Yeah, that. It took them ages to fix that, and even then they went back to what was there before. But eventually, a traditional software company will either buy something that fixes the problem or actually fix the problem and get around to it. You're quite right. OpenAI, which by the way defined these levels, are rushing through this, presumably because they're burning through their venture capital money. The $10 billion from Microsoft is going somewhere. They're coming under increased regulatory control, so they need to show the next big thing to get that next level of investment. So this could be scammy marketing that they're talking up what it's going to be capable of next, or they could actually have done it, I guess. But as you've said, given the errors there are at level 1, it really makes me quite scared for level 2 and how quickly they'll bringe onto level 3.
Yeah, I think it is a concern, but we've just got to keep our eye on it. And are we going to have any rules and governance and guardrails put in place? Who knows?
Well, we need to go and speak to Mr. Isaac Asimov and his laws of computing, don't we? Laws of robotics.
Laws of robotics, yeah. I do like that. I had no idea he wrote Foundation, by the way, so that's my next book to read. I did read iRobot very recently, but Foundation I need to go and read probably before I watch the TV show.
Maybe. This is a rat hole. We almost did on the main show today the top 75 science fiction books of all time. And a lot of the classic science fiction authors, people like Arthur C. Clarke, people like Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, the people that were there at the start of science fiction, sort of the 20s, when sort of post-Tolkien, really, and the First World War, wrote in the time. So a lot of the diversity and expectations we'd have of modern media are certainly not present in sort of the original classic science fiction novels or any of novels of that period. Yep. So go into it with an open mind of where these things are. The concepts and the ideas, the big ideas that come from a lot of these things are still tremendous, but some of them don't stand the test of time. In the same way Enid Blyton didn't for children's books.
Yeah, and you can see a lot, can't you, even in, is it Disney or Netflix, where they purple warning, some of the attitudes and behaviours are of the time. I've mangled the words, but you get the concept. No, I'm happy to go into it, but I think there's just some text that I would like to have read, because I think, like you say, they've got some great big ideas in them, and that's why I went back and read iRobot.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And Asimov was a long way from where we are with our large language models and things, but this is, if you watch Star Trek from the 60s with computers that talk back to you and all the rest of it, it's obviously been part of science fiction for a long time, a machine that thinks for itself. We're not there.
It's still science fiction now.
It's still very much science fiction now. And Turing himself, who, let's face it, we regard as the father of computing, certainly in the UK we regard him as the father of computing. He's on the £50 note, isn't he?
I've never seen a £50 note in recent times, so I'll take your word for it.
You're more likely to have seen one than me. I'm a poor academic. But yeah, so Alan Turing, the concept of a Turing test for how you decide what was a human being and what was a machine. And it's effectively you put behind a curtain until the human can't reason that it's reasoning as a human would. It's a bit more nuanced than that, but that's what it is. And you could understand how even the level 1, as they've defined in these chatbots, could confuse people into thinking that you're actually speaking to a human. with a bit of expert knowledge, you can get there. But an ignorant user could very much think that the chatbot that pops up when they're speaking to BT to get their next phone bill or whatever is actually a human being before it gets escalated to, is actually a chatbot before it gets escalated to a human being.
So I think you've done a good way of bringing us back. Do you think we're going to end up with a Turing test on these level 2 reasoners that OpenAI are going to bring out?
They'll have to do something like that.
It's going to be interesting, isn't it? It's certainly fascinating to watch. I think it's just scary the pace at which they are going at the moment.
Yeah, very much. Moving on and back to Microsoft. Apparently the White House is being urged to double check Microsoft isn't funneling AI to China. So this is, I suspect, part of Microsoft's push into Copilot and putting AI into everything. They don't want that to end up in Chinese hands for various embargoes and things like that, passing technology onto the Chinese. It's two Republicans warning this Microsoft deal raises the risk of advanced American AI technology making its way to China. So, yeah, interesting.
I think it certainly feels the Western world and China is going to be a tricky dance for a little while to come yet, isn't it, I think? And who's going to be the next China that pops up and go, actually, no, we don't want to deal with that country? Because that could equally happen. And do you think we're going to end up in a scenario where we're going to end up doing a lot more within countries again? We've had globalization, but actually, are we going to have it come back in and just be nationalization of certain things, like whether it's tech, whether it's manufacturing? I don't know.
It's really difficult to say that, isn't it? I mean, my natural inclination is everything moves in a circle where you expand, and then you contract and you go back down to the smallest possible unit. Again, you see in universities, you see in the NHS, you see in companies. Yep. They become monoliths and then they're forced to diversify. Boeing is a good example of this. Massive monolith, divests Spirit Aviation and others, and then they have to go back and buy them up again. NHS trusts, councils, it happens all the time. I think things like the EU, unless more countries do a Brexit, are going to stop that happening. The American market's not going to do that. You might get a pan-Asian market, or through military conquest, or economic conquest, other things can happen. But stuff like this it's problematic on lots of levels, isn't it? You're trusting AI to a company like Microsoft, and they're saying, no, we're super secure. None of this is coming out. We've demonstratively proved that they're not super secure. That these things leak all the time. I'm almost coming to the point in my mind where I don't think anything's secure. There was an AT&T leak was released this week where 100 million customers in America have had their phone records leaked, their location leaked, who they were talking to. That's most of the population of America at that point.
AT&T's huge, so that's not good, is it? But look, Microsoft are fending attackers off every day. They're never going to have a 100% success rate, are they? So, yeah. Like I said, I don't know where we're going to end up with this one. It is interesting. Obviously, China is rightfully so the country at the moment, but there's going to be more countries like this, I think, as the world moves on.
There are. At least you need an iPhone in China to log on to use Microsoft products, though, so that's something.
I still find that weird that there's obviously something going on there with Android. And like I say, at what point is manufacturing going to cease to happen abroad? Maybe we're going to all have our devices made in the country that we're buying them from.
So enough bad news. I thought we'd put in a slightly more whimsical story this week, and I just think this is incredible. Without getting too much into the geeky details of this is obviously a software engineer who had a bit too much free time on his hands taking a flight recently, and he worked out a way to tunnel his internet connection through one text field on the points form of his airline. So quite often on airlines that have Wi-Fi, you can sign into the customer loyalty program and they'll give you text messaging, or at least the ability to log in and claim your air miles. This is what this guy did. Sat on a flight 10,000 feet in the air, pulled out his laptop and worked out a way to actually poll via the first name field on a form for your points how to get a working internet send and response thing. It's a fascinating article. If you're at all technically minded, or you just want to appreciate the madness that some people go to not pay for Wi-Fi, it just blew me away.
It's possibly not just playing for Wi-Fi, it's also the joy of the hack, isn't it, I think? But to be fair, like, what a hack he's done here. Like, I had a skim through the article. This is a very clever person, and fair play.
I'm taking nothing away from him. I bow down before his technical ability, his the way to play this out, and his fundamental understanding. I mean, this is a true software engineer in the truest sense of the word.
Yeah, I wish I carried on being a software engineer and had some of these skills, but I was reading how he's done it, and not only is he a very good software engineer, but also very good at explaining what he's done, diagramming it, providing the source code. Just super interesting, the lengths he's gone to.
The little state diagram got to describe the various interactions within the system. I still remember to this day sitting in exams drawing those out in UML in some of our classes in university.
Yeah, those days are forever etched in my brain as well.
Yeah, I think I had to do the state of a cash machine from a user putting money in it, putting the card in it to request the money out for one exam question.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Moving on a little bit and back to security again, Apple has warned iPhone users in 98 countries about mercenary spyware attacks. We featured a story like this about 7 weeks ago, I think, where a text message went out to a bunch of people who were likely at high risk of attack, and here's another one.
Why is it just people in 98 countries? Is it a localized attack? Is it a different variant? But how do I know... How do I know if I've been a victim? What version do I need to patch my device to so that this doesn't impact me? There's nothing.
You keep it up to date, and what you get is you get an email or a text warning that says Apple detected that you are being targeted by a mercenary spyware attack that is trying to remotely compromise the iPhone associated with your Apple ID enclosed. The attack is likely targeting you specifically because of who you are or what you do. Although it's never possible to achieve absolute certainty when detecting such attacks, Apple has a high confidence in this warning. Please take it seriously. So you'll be told if you're at risk.
How do I know that's not a fish?
Could well be, but they're not asking you to click any links in there, are
okay.
they? They're just, yeah. It's good on one level that they're doing this, but like you say, it does make you very concerned if you're not told about it. Is it already too late?
Yeah, is it already too late? But like you, I always run the latest version of the OS. I try and patch my family. I'm not sure I am a target for this kind of thing, but it's just interesting. It's 98 countries and not worldwide. But
no, but if you think of the Pegasus spyware, you wouldn't know if it had been installed on your phone. That was the point. You only needed to receive a text message, I think it was, with a dodgy link, and there you go. You had the spyware installed on your phone. Yeah,
and there's me always thinking how safe my iPhone is because of the sandboxing and what have you, but obviously it's not always as safe as you think.
It's still a computer, mate.
This is true.
As all our stories almost every week feature, it's still a computer, and computers are accessible through human beings doing stupid things, software not being properly configured, or it looks like state-sponsored actors being able to insert things into very delicate bits of code. There was a story this week about a bug called Refresh, I think, an SSH bug, not the one we featured recently, but this one was from 2004, or Regression, that's what it's called. They patched it in 2004, they reverted a bit of code, and it made the 2004 bug vulnerable again, and it hit almost every server that runs an SSH software. And you think of how many computers run SSH. Your Mac does, my Mac does, my Linux boxes do, most Windows boxes do in some way, because that's how administrators administrate things. So these things, even if you think they're dealt with, can come back and haunt you. It's still a computer.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. It's still a computer at the end of the day.
Yep. A quick one. Apple has made a piece of software, or Google has made a piece of software to make it easier for you to switch from Google Photos to iCloud Photos. This is good. I think this kind of thing should be possible. If you're an Android user, you want to come to iOS, you should have a tool that helps you take your photos out and puts it there. I would caution anybody about to do this. Make sure to buy some iCloud storage first, because you could have a lot of photos in Google Photos that won't make it in.
Yeah. It is good. You should be able to move between either system freely. That would be my view. I've never done it, but I would not welcome doing it.
I partially did it. I took everything out of Google Photos without shutting down Google Photos. It's still there, but I wanted to see how it would go. It wasn't great. I lost lots of metadata related to location and times and dates and all sorts of things.
Yeah, it's one of those things that most users wouldn't understand, but obviously you and I know a little bit of inside baseball. Yeah, it's quite a feat, I think, to do this.
Yeah, so good. Let's have it the other way too. People want to come out of iCloud Photos and want to go to Google Photos. Both of these things should be possible.
Yeah, completely agree.
So good, more like this, please. Less like this, please. Do you remember the unofficial Apple weblog?
I don't think I've really read it a huge amount, but it does ring. The acronym rings a bell. So it's TUAW, and that does ring a bell from circa 20 years ago.
So 2004 when it launched, and it was the premier places to go and get Apple news back in the day. Some very sort of prominent journalists who are around these days were actually featured on it. So Christina Warren, who's well known now was one of the original journalists for this. Then you let them get a start. Anyway, the domain eventually acquired by I think America Online, and then Yahoo. Yahoo sold it to a company called Web Orange Limited. And this is where it goes wrong, is that Web Orange Limited have relaunched the unofficial Apple weblog, full of AI-generated stories, but still featuring these original journalists' bylines. So there's rubbishy stories being pushed out from something that died in 2015, but under the bylines of now quite well-known people, and that shouldn't matter anyway. You're just pushing out AI garbage from from a website and misrepresenting people. This is a bad story.
It's just not. There's nothing good about this. What are they doing for this? Is this just to get eyeballs and advert sales that they've basically conjured up a site with AI, but yeah, they couldn't use AI to make up fictitious journalists? Like, it's all a bit bizarre. If you've gone to all that effort, you may as well have the fictitious journalist to go with it, unless you're trying to leech off their name and get some more hits that way. But the whole thing's just horrible, isn't it? It's all a bit icky.
It is icky and shows one of the potential uses for AI of how garbage it is, really.
I just think it's a massive waste of time for whoever's done this. Just what a horrible project to work on.
Yeah, very nasty. Less nasty, Samsung have had their, I think they call it Unpacked event. They've released all of their new things. Well, not all of their new things. They haven't done the premier line is the Samsung Galaxy S whatever, follows a year, S23, S22, and that's how you know what generation they're from. So we're on 24 at the moment, but this was their foldable event where they announced the Galaxy Z. I'm not going to say Z. Galaxy Z Fold 6 and Flip 6, and basically same as last year but slightly better. This is a very Apple playbook, I'd say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It is very Apple-y. So for the uninitiated of us, right, so we've got the Galaxy Fold 6 and Flip 6. Why aren't they called 24? And then at what point in the year do the S24s come out? Do you know? Is that soon or has that happened?
I think it's Techtober. Everything gets announced in Techtober,
okay,
right?
Fine. Why are these off kilter then?
As with Apple's events, it gives you 2 bumps in the year, doesn't it? It gives you 2 chances to sell things. So I respect this. They actually do something in the summer, unlike most tech companies.
They're spreading it out, which is what I've said to you for a while. Why don't tech companies spread it out so you're not cramming it all in at once? So I did see last week, I had the hands on a Pixel Fold, which I've never seen one of those. It was quite a nice shape and size, a lot more squarer than what these look. These are very tall and rectangular. So what do these phones give us then? So these have the latest version of Android OS, I'm guessing?
Latest version of Android, obviously, but that's going to be 16 or 15. I'm beginning to lose track. They'll have the current version, not the one that's in beta at the moment, but what they have got are newer processors. So they've got Snapdragon 8 Gen 3s, slightly better screens, slightly more robust hinges, slightly better waterproofing, just slightly better everything all along, really. And they'll be baked in with Samsung's new AI stuff as well. So all that stuff that the S24, when it was released, was very well received for, these will now be built into these too. So I think this is okay. Not every year do you need to dramatically change the design. You just want the things that are good to get better. For example, now these flip phones and fold phones are rated IP48, which is better than the IPX8 rating that they had before. That was just, I think it's to do with dust resistance as the X. Now they're actually waterproof as well. So these are minor improvements, but I bet if you've lost a phone due to dust ingress or water ingress, you're really going to appreciate this. So I think this is good. You know, that they're just iterating on the designs. They've obviously got it fairly locked down for what they like about them. The software is presumably getting better all the time, and putting in your processor in them means they'll be faster. If you think how well received the S24 was, how fast they were, how performant they were, and all that stuff, baking it into this phone makes sense too. So I think this is a good thing.
I wouldn't disagree. And the design looks very nice. It's hard to pick what's Apple designed now and what's Samsung designed. I think they both have borrowed and shared things from each other, but certainly the Fold, but no, the Flip, sorry. It does look very much like Apple, where it's got the rings around the camera lenses and the styler buttons and everything. They look lovely.
I think that Flip 6, very pretty little phone, particularly in the gold color, gold and black that they're illustrating it, and a 4,000 milliamp hour battery on something that thin as well. I thought that is a nice looking device. It
is. It looks chunky when it's folded, but maybe it's hard to tell because you're not seeing it with anything for context in the flat picture. I think they look really good. I still maintain I'd love one of these for my iPhone, please. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I got to say, when I was doing my Android experiment, I hovered long and hard over the flip phones to buy one, because the price wasn't. It was comparable to what I was looking for in pixels. So maybe if I go again, I will consider a flip or a fold next time.
So the Fold 6 starts at $1,899 and the Flip starts at $1,099. So it's still a good amount of money.
It is, but they offer something that an iPhone doesn't.
Yeah, it's true. It's an interesting form factor.
And double the screens you get on an iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be expensive, isn't it? You've got twice as many screens and cameras. And
it's a lot of OLEDs. They also announced a smart Galaxy Ring, or a Samsung Galaxy Ring, which is a $399 device, which will do some of the stuff that a smartwatch will, but obviously be less distracting than a smartwatch because they don't have screens. It's going to do things like heart rate. It can vibrate to give you reminders. So this is apparently a growing thing. Apparently the England football team are wearing smart rings.
I did not know that. I must confess, I did not see that on my 4K iPlayer feed that I was watching. I quite like the idea of the ring thing because I don't wear my smartwatch, but I would like something that's just maybe counting my steps and my vitals. I don't think I'd want notifications, but I'd like to be able to just not think, oh, I must grab my phone off the side. I'd quite happily go for a stroll without it.
But if all it's doing is slightly passively recording health data for you, just giving you your heart rate, your blood oxygen, your temperature, it's a better position than your wrist, frankly. Being able to pull those kinds of things out, that's pretty good. That can build that into the app. It's not a huge amount of money. I think they go about a week on a charge. The charger looks really cool. You plonk them on a transparent little box thing that's got a USB-C connector at the bottom. You can snap the lid shut on it, a bit like an iPad case, but the ring sits in the middle and you get a nice glow around the ring as a percentage for how charged it is. So I think this is a really smart little device.
Yeah, fair play to Samsung. I think whoever they've got doing their hardware design is doing a fantastic job on all the things we've seen today.
Yeah, well done, Samsung. No negative marks other than they're a bit expensive, but all phones are too expensive.
Everything's costing more, I think. So I wouldn't put that down to them.
So you're the Teams fan. So do you want to talk us through what Teams are doing in terms of EU laws?
So Teams is changing how their connectors work to potentially fit in with the EU laws. So they're retiring the current way it works and they're moving it all over to Power Automate. And I think this is a common theme with Microsoft. I think they're trying to move everything over to Power Automate. I've seen it with Dynamics, but yet they haven't announced deprecation yet in Dynamics for older methods. But this is going to happen from I think it's from the 1st of October. All connectors will stop working. So this could be a problem for big organisations if they've only just been told at the beginning of July that by October all connectors need to move over to this new architecture. I don't know how big a problem this is. It's not something I've used before, but given that Teams has been prevalent since the pandemic in a lot of organisations, it could be a little problematic.
Yeah, there's a comment from resident analyst Jim Gaynor who said that Teams has exited its golden child status within Microsoft. As such, it's been sent off to the cash cow mines of wildly adopted projects and services, joining Office, Windows and others, to use its market position to generate more revenue and help boost the profile of the newest cadre of golden children. So this sort of ties in with what we were saying about the EU forced them to unbundle Teams, but that's going to turn out to be potentially a really nice excuse to get them to get users that are now very committed to Teams to pay through the nose to keep using it.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. This is Microsoft's got MO for this, haven't they? So you can see it now, and I do like that analogy that it's moved off to the cash cow mines from being the golden child, because again, Microsoft have done this before.
They have, and for many people, yourself for example, it's an essential product. It's just what you roll out to your organisation.
100%. Everybody's got it, and to move away from it would take way longer than 3 months to plan, execute, and deliver it.
And I know that cash-strapped universities, most of whom moved to Zoom during the pandemic and we got rid of our phones, have been looking at Teams because it's potentially cheaper than paying, for Zoom. But as they start to do this becomes a problem, doesn't it? I mean, it's good for Zoom that they're going to continue to be competitive to Microsoft offering a product that's like this. But you can understand how when your Microsoft sales rep is telling you, but it's just embedded and it's going to have this and it's going to have that and you don't need to worry about X, Y, and Z. That's quite compelling to an IT manager because it's just default. You go along with what the vendor is. You're buying for your server licenses, your desktop licenses, your client access licenses for whatever else that you've got. But that adds up really quickly.
Yeah, it does add up quickly, but I guess that once it's in, how quickly does that add up against the pain point of swapping? And that's a decision a lot of IT managers are going to have to make.
Yep. Interesting times. Also in interesting times, Apple has a new product today in the lineup. We weren't expecting that, were we?
We say a new product.
It's a new colour.
So, is it though? So yeah, Apple has released the new midnight colour for HomePod Mini. And I went and looked at this, I was like, I can't see anything different. And then it just dawned on me, oh, they've just swapped black for midnight. I think it was called black. And they've just swapped black for midnight. Just seems a bit odd time to do it, but it's still the same products underneath. They still sell all the other colours. So the HomePod Mini is now in midnight, as is, I think, the big HomePod is in mini and white. And so now the Mini matches it name-wise. It just seems a bit of an odd change, but maybe they're just trying to get everything in sync for midnight.
Why do you release this when you're about to change Siri and make it AI-tastic when you need big chips to be able to do this? Why?
I'd like to think, I don't get why they're doing it. It just seems like a marketing mop-up. I'd like to think the HomePod will work with Siri using the fancy not on device ability, and everything would go off to the cloud. So I'm hopeful the HomePod will carry on. I still want to know whether the original HomePods will get the latest update this summer, because to be fair to Apple, they've kept updating the original HomePod for quite a long time, and I hope that continues. It's just odd, isn't it?
It's very odd. My HomePods are unplugged and sitting off to the side. They're effectively useless.
Well, if ever you want to sell them to your co-host, let me know.
I'm sure we can come up with an arrangement.
Shall we move on to media?
Let's talk about media. Seems appropriate if we move away from HomePods and talk about media. I've been quite good with media this week, if I do say so myself. I've been less so with games, as we'll come to, but I've been quite good with media. I have watched 2 films and started the new Apple TV Plus show that's available as well. Shall I tell you about that?
Yeah, you're doing way better than me.
So I'm on a bit of a Marvel kick at the moment. I obviously watched the 2 Deadpool films over the last couple of weeks, and I'm very excited still for that to come along next week. I think it's out on the 26th. So Deadpool versus Wolverine on the 26th, which I will probably go to the cinema to watch. But over the weekend, I watched Black Panther: Wakanda Forever on Disney Plus, and it's not a bad film. You said you're not really into the Marvel universe, so did you watch the first Black Panther film?
No.
Oh. Okay, so Black Panther was notable for being a film that pushed the boundaries for what black people saw in the cinema, effectively. All superheroes are white. They're always seen as white saviors. They're directed by white people. They're script written by white people, all this kind of stuff. And Black Panther wasn't. It had a largely black cast. It was almost entirely black crew. The director was black, and this was a real landmark of it. Finally, would you believe? I mean, it's a bit horse-bolted, stable door open, and should have been done many, many moons ago, but what was produced was an absolutely terrific film. The first Black Panther film is fun. It's got danger in the right places. It's very cinematic, wonderfully acted, great script, awesome music. I could not recommend it. If you only watch one Marvel film, I think Black Panther's not a bad place to start, actually. It's terrific. Unfortunately, the star, Chadwick Boseman, died of cancer in between the first one and the second one. He was a terrific talent. He was great in lots of things, but he was really sort of notable as the Black Panther in the first film. So Black Panther 2, they really accounted for this, and they kill off the character, in universe as well. They don't try and recast Black Panther. They sort of continue the story of where it was going, and you really feel that loss watching the film. So I'd say that sort of affects the film in both a positive and a negative way. You kind of miss that energy that Chadwick Boseman brought to it. You're with the crew and the cast who are obviously missing somebody they respected, loved, worked with for years, developing, and he's in more than Black Panther, and he's a lot of the MCU movies. But Wakanda Forever sort of takes that sort of slightly somber tone about it. It's quite a good film. It's a bit too long. It's got a really good bad guy, sort of morally bad guy for the actor that plays Namor. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's not I'd say Black Panther's a 8.5, 9 out of 10 movie. Wakanda Forever's probably closer to 6 or 7 for me. But if you enjoyed the first one, I think there's a lot there to be said for it. And as a tribute to Chadwick Boseman, I think they do a terrific job.
So I should probably watch Black Panther. But given that he passed away in between, it does make sense, I guess, that they've killed the character off. It feels like that was the right decision, and they've handled it in the right way. So I have watched some Marvel films, circa the first 10 or so, and then I did this in the pandemic, when Disney Plus was new, and then I've never really circled back to even try and catch up with where we are today, because there's probably then another 15 films that I've not seen. But maybe I should give this a go.
Yeah, the latter phases of the MCU have not been great. Things like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania are not just bad films, they're terrible films. But there's the odd high point in it, and I'd say this and the Guardians of the Galaxy, the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie, are the high points of the current phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I guess the problem they had, though, is they had such a good batting average. A bit like Pixar, they had a really good batting average to begin with. It can be then really hard to sustain that ongoing.
Yeah. And to be fair to them, they've tried to do something no media company has ever done. Having all the interconnectedness between not only the films, but then on the TV shows as well, and to try and keep that going, it became, it was impressive, but it became a burden on the viewer and for them to keep all these things going, frankly.
Because they're also intertwined.
Yeah, if you wanted to watch the latest Spider-Man film, and then you're wondering, who's that character there? Well, you had to know he was some guy from a Netflix thing from years ago that they're about to release a new Disney Plus show for, maybe. So it all became a bit too hard going, I think, for fans. And if you're a casual cinema goer like you, it would have been having to have all that lore and knowledge was challenging for people.
Yeah, it did put me off a little bit. That I got so far behind. It's like, well, I'll just skip them when they come out of the cinema because I haven't got enough background.
Yeah, fair. The second film to watch was Mad Max Furiosa. So the original Mad Max Fury Road, and George Miller has written a lot of and directed a lot of Mad Max films. So I'm focusing on the moment Tom Hardy on. Mad Max Fury Road is probably in my top 5 films, if not my top 3 films. It is an absolute work of art, and I love it to bits.
That's quite a statement.
I stand by it. It's a beautiful film that has such a compelling chase plot to it. The music, the characters, the acting, the action sequences are probably the best in any movie ever.
Wow, okay.
Have you seen it?
No.
Oh my gosh. I'm slightly flabbergasted now.
For our listeners, Rod is looking very disappointed with me at this point. Which is odd, I haven't seen it. I can't explain why I haven't seen it. It just kind of passed me by.
It's so good. Tom Hardy is great in it. Charlize Theron is great in it, and Nicholas Hoult, who is always amazing in everything that he does, is just terrific in it. It's a tour de force of an action film. It's as far as that can go. Anyway, Mad Max Furiosa is a prequel to explain one of the characters in Mad Max Fury Road. And while there are still, also directed by George Miller, while there are still standout amazing action sequences, I don't need all this backstory, and I think it actually takes away from even going to the Mel Gibson Mad Max films. You were in the moment. You understand what was going on. You understand the characters' motivations. You understand why they are where they are. You don't need all this world building, and I think Mad Max Furiosa suffers from this, and it's too long. It's not a bad film. If I gave Black Panther Wakanda Forever a 6 out of 10, I'd give Furiosa 6.5 maybe, because I like the world, and again, it's got some terrific actors in it, including Anya Taylor-Joy, who's very, very good in many, many things. But yeah, go and watch Mad Max Fury Road, and I'm less bothered about Furiosa.
Okay, understood. So I need to go watch Fury Road. Yeah, like I said, I can't explain why I haven't. I've seen the Mel Gibson ones when I was a kid. I've never really circled back to them. I kind of want to go and watch the whole lot, but just for completeness, because it's been such a long time.
I don't think. I mean, the Mel Gibson ones, Mel Gibson being as problematic as he is, are very much a product of the time, in the same way we were talking about the science fiction books before. But Mad Max Fury Road is special, and if you think the director's film before that was Babe, Pig in the City, that sort of culture clash between those two things is really incredible.
Fair play. It's quite a pivot, isn't it?
Is a bit, but stop everything, even recording the podcast, and go and watch Mad Max Fury Road. It is a tour de force.
Yeah, I think I am stuck in a problem in often I put on something I've seen before because I'm busy doing stuff, so I watch something I've seen before. And I've been watching The Big Bang Theory, the final season, because I wanted to refresh my memory of it. But I know the characters, I know the world, and sometimes I need to stop and go and actually just not do work, and just focus on something new. And that's probably what puts me off watching new films a little bit at the moment.
If you don't like it, you didn't like Barbie either, so it's not me, it's you. If you don't like it, okay.
Yeah, Barbie just did not gel for me. I apologise for not liking Barbie as the only person who didn't enjoy it.
The third thing I have watched this weekend is Sunny. Sunny is the new Apple TV Plus TV show starring Rashida Jones. It's 30 minutes. It's sort of a dark comedy. It's made by the A24 group, who do lots of edgy, interesting things in cinema. Things like Ex Machina and films like that come from A24. It's interesting. The first episode was okay. I'm not giving too much away if I say it starts with a bit of a mystery about a wife of a Japanese gentleman. They're in Japan, set in Kyoto, who dies. Her husband and her son appears to die in a plane crash, and he leaves her a robot. It's set in slightly near future. First one was okay, a couple of grins. The second episode was much better. Sort of really expands the mystery, really expands the humor. It's quite, like I say, a dark comedy. Not bad. Might be one to keep an eye on, I think.
Okay, that is good, because there's been little that's compelled me on Apple TV, I must say.
Yeah, it's been definitely below par recently. And that's it. What have you got?
What have I got? So first up, I've got Axel F on Netflix. So assuming you've seen Beverly Hills Cop back in the 80s. I watched this film a lot as a child. And I saw a friend text me say it's out on Netflix. So I went and bought Netflix that night and watched it. And actually, I quite enjoyed it. I didn't think I would. I thought they'd ruin it. But to be fair to them, I think they did a pretty good job of... I don't know whether they're going to do any more, but for me, they did a good job of bringing the worlds together, the three films and what have you. And they brought some new characters in. The plot was okay. I just thought the whole thing was pretty good, and had some good references back to previous films, but also had a new plot. And I just thought it was done really well. It was the cinematography looked beautiful, like, you know, proper Netflix 4K streaming. Actually, yeah, quite enjoyed it. Made me laugh. And just remember what Beverly Hills Cop 2 was like, because that film was huge when it came out, if I'm sure you'll remember. So yeah, I actually enjoyed it more than I thought it would.
Yes, I'm old, Chris. Thanks for reminding me.
No. Well, I remember how big it was, you know. And whereas I was talking to some 20-year-old kids kids at work, adults at work, and they're like, yeah, I think I've seen Beverly Hills Cop. You know, it wasn't a big thing in their childhood, whereas obviously Beverly Hills Cop 2 was just massive, wasn't it?
I remember Beverly Hills Cop being massive. I don't remember Beverly Hills Cop being as big. I mean, it's the film that broke Eddie Murphy away from being a stand-up comedian and becoming an actor, and he went on to greater things ever since, didn't he? But that was a good film. I really enjoyed it. For an 80s action comedy, it did a really good job of that. He was a very compelling start. Watch, the music was terrific, and you know, that the Axel F theme tune is iconic.
Yeah. And they bring it all back, and they've got all the same characters in it. Everybody looks a bit older and tireder, but just really good. And they even self-referential. The Axel's getting interviewed, and they're like, "Oh, I can see you were in Beverly Hills in the 80s twice. Oh, and once in the 90s wasn't so good." And that was a good reference to that film not being very good. So yeah, I just thought it was well done, and I would recommend if you got Netflix and you want to just relive a bit of 80s nostalgia.
Fair enough. What else?
And then I've popped in Gladiator 2 trailer. I loved Gladiator 1. It probably came out around 2000, give or take. I remember being at university. Gladiator 2, the trailer's out. Go watch the trailer. It looks just like they've done a good job. To my eyes, I'm curious to see what it's like in reality, but that's one I'm definitely looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, I watched the trailer. It's Ridley Scott again, but it's not Russell Crowe, is it?
It's not Russell Crowe. It is the gentleman from Normal People, Paul. I'm going to mangle his name, Mescal, and also his partner in Normal People is the female lead in the Twisters film that we discussed last year. So it's interesting to see those two go from a relatively small TV show off to two different Hollywood blockbusters, which is fantastic.
And Pedro Pascal's in it as well, and he's everywhere. He's terrific, Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, so it looks grand. So I'm looking forward to that. It's got some good films coming.
Yeah, The Mandalorian's and Gladiator too. I think that's good. Anything else in media?
No, not for me.
So a very quick mention in games, because we both seem to be really struggling with games recently. We should do a games-focused episode that's not Gran Turismo or Call of Duty, really, where we sort of.
I think I've got the same problem with games as I do with films, in that I play a lot of games I know because I want to finish them. I did back my Switch the other day. And I did actually, do you know what? I have tried a new game. I tried Mario versus Donkey Kong, or Kong versus Mario. I can't remember which way around it is. It was a free demo on the Switch. I just tried that out. I actually quite liked it. Quite a little puzzle game. Would recommend giving it a go if ever you boot up your Switch.
Why isn't it in the show notes, Chris? Put it in the show notes, Chris.
Because I'd completely forgotten I turned my Switch off.
There you go. This is just a little piece that might be worth reading about how Apple Arcade, if you're an Apple Plus subscriber, I always forget, iCloud Plus, I forget the name of the service, subscriber, you get Apple Arcade free. What's the name of the service?
Apple One, and you get Apple Arcade within it.
And music, and Apple TV Plus, and news, and a couple of other bits and pieces, and iCloud storage, etc., etc. Apple Arcade is part of that. It launched with a big splash. There were lots of interesting games in it. It's not anymore, is it? It's just refreshed versions of previous Apple iOS glories. So, for example, this month, what you're getting is Vampire Survivors, which was a free game anyway on iOS. I think it was $2.99 or $3.99 on Steam, but it was a free game on iOS. And Temple Run Legends, which is a new game, but we all played Temple Run back in the heyday of the App Store. It was an endless runner. You made the guy go left, right, or jump, and that was pretty much it, or duck occasionally. And there's a sort of reimagining of that, but neither of these is very compelling. And frankly, if I didn't get Apple Arcade just as part of the bundle, I wouldn't pay for it.
So I agree with you on I wouldn't pay for it, but I do think Apple's got a problem here, because in one hand they're trying to tell us, look, you get all these amazing games, developers are bringing out these amazing games on your iPad and your iPhone and your Mac now, and they're really trying to get more of a compelling story. They're not there yet, but they're trying really hard. And then on the other hand, they're going, oh, but in our service, we're including all this old stuff that you've probably paid 10 years ago. And it's like, you need to, bring those two a lot closer to each other. They just had two very different stories. And Apple seemed completely blind to the fact that they just, like you say, bundling really old games in that are largely defunct, I guess. And actually, they should be bundling in. Get me some good titles bundled in, please. That's what we need. Get Assassin's Creed in there. Then you'll start turning some heads.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely going to help, isn't it? And I guess it's harder for those AAA developers to bring games they spent a lot of money onto this, but Apple should pay them, frankly, to get people. This is where the cool games are. We've got big developers here, and they're bringing AAA titles to it. Vampire Survivors is a great game. I've played it an awful lot on my Steam Deck. Again, this isn't compelling to someone who doesn't know, but it was compelling 5 years ago or 4 years ago when it came out. It's not now.
Yeah, I think that's the whole problem. It's not compelling. And like I say, they're telling a double story here. It's very bizarre.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, we get nothing else in games other than go and try out Mario v Donkey Kong on the Switch.
I try and get my kids to use Apple Arcade because we have the family plan. And it's like, if you get anything on Apple Arcade, you won't get any adverts. At least it's free. I'm happy for you to install nearly all of them, But they always want to go off and get some weird ad-riddled game.
Because that's where the cool kids are. They're not on Apple Arcade.
This is true.
Main show.
Let's get into the main show.
An appropriately short one, I think. So, there's an article featured here from a Norwegian gentleman whose name I can't pronounce, Haven, maybe, talking about the reason Apple may be struggling. And this is something we've touched about for a long time, that we use Apple products because we quite like the products. They make amazing hardware. They've made reasonable software. But what makes an Apple product compelling is really the software that you can get for it that's made by other developers. So it's that super shiny app that sort of grabbed your attention, that brought you in and out. The super shiny app back in the day for you, for example, was OS X. You just thought it was a leap above what you saw on the Windows side of the world, and my enthusiasm for it might have also been part of it. But I think you liked what you saw in the operating system. Fair?
Yeah, no, I like the eye candy. I like something different. I wanted something different to play with. But you're right, though. A lot of where you're heading, it was also a big pull. For me, the OS got me in, and the quality of the hardware. But you come for that, but then you end up staying, and the reason you stay is what you're going to discuss now.
Yeah, and this gentleman on his blog says he likes Apple hardware. He loves some of it. He likes the operating system. He likes the focus on privacy, which we've talked about before. He likes how some of the ecosystem comes together with your phone and everything working together with your iPad, which we've talked about before. But he thinks he could enjoy a framework laptop. We've talked about them before. An Asus phone. If you swapped Samsung phone in instead of Asus, that's we've just said the same thing. Some Sony earbuds. He could enjoy them just as well, and he's not wrong. It's that's not what makes it sticky for us. What makes it sticky for us is everything he's about to talk about. And what he does in the rest of his article is just go through all the apps and utilities and things that actually give Apple platforms value for him. And the list is incredible. I mean, I don't know if you've scrolled through it, but to enhance your Mac experience, all of these things are what make you come back and use the Mac. They make your day job a little bit easier. It might be the app you use on your iPad that Microsoft may have spent time getting together to work well. But it's all of these things that actually make it valuable. So I quite like this argument, I think, that when you scroll and when you see the length of the article for all the things he swapped out to make his life better, it's a great argument, I think, for it's symbiotic, this relationship. Apple make the platform, the developers come and help sell the platform with the wonderful software that they produce for it. Microsoft could make the same argument. My feeling is that he's moving parasitic relationship, where Apple view developers as a parasite. They deserve to make money from everything that's going on their platform because they brought the platform. And his argument is that, no, the fact that people wouldn't be using the platform as much without these amazing apps that are available on it. And some of these apps are available on other platforms as well, but what has kept you and me here for as long as we have been, and what made the iPhone great, was these amazing, well thought out, beautifully crafted apps that fit perfectly within that hardware and software that you had an affinity for. And I think that's a really great way of putting it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there's a lot of apps he's listed out that, yep, I recognise it. And even though I don't use my Mac as much as I would do, and if my work supported it, I'd be 100% on my Mac, way more than what I have been. But like you, I love the whole ecosystem. You know, if I want to text you, I can do it from my Mac, I can do it from my phone, I can do it from my iPad. It's all there, my links. You know, the whole world talks to each other. Yeah, but part of the reason I came was, you know, I used to use apps by Panic. I used to love Coda 2. It was a big web development platform they had. I can't even remember when, back in the mid 2000s. And I used to use Transmit that they wrote. You know, I used obviously Apple OS, but I wasn't using Final Cut or Logic. I was using it as being a web developer, and I loved it. I loved using the Mac. I loved programming on it. And the Mac, the hardware, the software's only got better and faster. And I think a lot of third-party apps are very good, even though a lot more apps, they all look the same these days. Because you used to have the saying, didn't you? You could tell a Mac app, so it's built a proper native Mac app because it looked right at home there. It had gorgeous icons, toolbars, and it just, looked amazing, and it integrated really well. And we've kind of come away from that as Apple have got more and more platforms and tried to generalize how you code them and build them. You've ended up actually with a lot of apps looking very generic, I think, and which is a bit of a disappointment. But I get why they've done it for the whole scale piece. But no, he's right. A lot of people are here for all the third-party bolt-ons. I personally just prefer the way the Mac works to Windows. I think I had a bad experience with Windows in the late 90s, 2000s, where it just filled up with cruft, it was slow. I didn't play a lot of games on it, so I didn't miss that when I transitioned. In a way, I'd like my MacBook to boot into Windows, because if I do want to have a dabble on a Windows game, I could, but it's a shame that era's over. But I completely understand why that era's over.
Yeah, it's a good argument, and I think Apple would do well to read this, that it should be symbiotic, and this is why things for me like the Vision Pro are failing. The symbiosis is gone. It's the move to parasitism, or the view of parasitism. These developers bring so much value, and of course, they deserve to make money, and Apple deserves some money. They don't deserve all of the money here, and that's what we're seeing play out in the EU and the rest of it. It just felt very well put to me, the whole article, and demonstrating the breadth of software that made you love the Mac, and still can to some extent. I think that's why it's so hard when we talk about Apple being, I don't want to use the word evil, as pig-headed as they've been recently, and it's a problem when you look at all laid down in one nice place for you for how amazing it is as an ecosystem and as a platform.
Yeah, it does feel like Apple is struggling to read the room a little bit at the moment, or they've read the room and they've just ignored the room and they've just ploughed on anyway. And I get that they're a big company, they're dealing with lots of battles on lots of different fronts, whether it's with developers, whether it's with legal entities, governments, various other partners, companies. I get there's a lot going on just in any one day at Apple, but equally they've made this piece, they've shaped it into this massive behemoth. They didn't have to get into media production. They could have carried on doing, just TV set-top boxes and what have you, but they've chosen some of these things and they need to see it through and do it. They've got enough money, they need to see it through and do it to really good quality. So what am I trying to say with this? I think you're right. Apple has lost its way a little bit by having too many OSs. what is a bit annoying, I think, with the vision piece is they probably should have made it more like the iPad. If it's built off the iPad, they need to come up with a mechanism to keep both in sync at the same time. So if you're going to spend the effort, you're doing it once, not twice. Or just really focus on the OSs that you're doing. Microsoft have managed to keep going as a very big company and not have this fragmentation that Apple are having.
I don't think it's even that necessarily. I think there's problems with the iPad development as well. And you see the tail off in developers there too. People are on iOS because they've got to be. They're on iPad OS because there's kind of a history of it and there's a certain amount of computing you can do on there, but we've talked about the limitations of the iPad before. I think this is greed. And maybe not even greed, it's capitalism in action. This the push to always show profit means that you need to absolutely focus down on extracting every pence, dollar, cent from your customer, from your developer, from every point in the platform. And they've got away with it. They developed the App Store, they got the 30%, they now depend on the 30%, and that's why you see the stubbornness with regulators. They're not willing to give up 1% of that or 2% of that. They want the whole 30% and they think it's all owed to them because they built the thing, and they're missing the fact it wasn't just them. They brought developers with them that helped them sell the platforms, that helped them sell the operating systems, that had the enthusiasm to buy the iPad to begin with. I just feel this typifies it very well. So I don't think it is focus. It's focus on the bottom line. It's not focus on what's best for you or I as a customer or those developers who are also their customers, but bring value.
I must confess, in recent times, I've looked at my colleagues running Windows 11, thought, actually, fair play to Microsoft. They've done a good job of making it look good. You know, all the icons are different shapes, like the app, like the Mac used to be. It's a nice, bright interface, quite engaging. Everything's rounded. And actually, I think Microsoft have possibly come out better in the desktop way for certainly visual appeal, because they've just got the one OS to maintain. It's certainly interesting how the tables have turned.
So that leads us nicely to our next topic. I would argue that the Linux desktops have actually done equally as good a job. So you've been running Mint on one of your laptops recently. You found that fairly consistent. It looked fine. It was easy on the eye. You haven't spent enough time on it, I suspect, to like really particularly feel that this is where I want to be. But you have got that sort of consistency with a desktop and the way that it works.
I think, to be fair, nearly any GUI OS you run now, it's a lot easier for them to have, you know, a very decent OS just straight out the gates. Whereas obviously years ago it was a lot more work to do it, but nearly any GUI OS you run now just generally looks great straight off the installation. And certainly Mint OS was very easy for somebody to pick up and play with. You know what you're doing very quickly with it, I think, even if you haven't used Linux before. So
this is a counterpoint. My MacBook Pro M3 that I'm talking to on here, 14-inch one, I think was just over $2,000. Something in that region, I think, for the amount of money that it was. And it is a phenomenal piece of hardware and makes me very productive. I can do my job on it. I can do all sorts of bits and pieces to it. It's terrific. It's got all the software I could want. I'm very familiar with it. I'm very efficient on it. But that's quite a lot of money. At some point on this podcast, maybe not for recording the podcast, but I'm going to do a month of Linux experiment where I move over. So that'll be challenging.
You should
I have bought
Android and Linux at the same time.
Yeah, I have bought a Dell Latitude. I don't even know what it is. I have to do it. It's a Dell Latitude 7310. This is a 4-year-old laptop, I think. It's
Probably.
It's an i5 Intel chip, 10th generation, so that's relatively new, considering we're just talking about 14th and 15th generations. It's only got 8 gigs of RAM. It's got a 1920 by 1080 screen, which is fine. It's got 512 gigs SSD. It was 140 quid.
That's pretty cheap, isn't it? It's a lot of laptop for the money.
And it's got a touchscreen. And it's got a hinge I can bend all the way back, and I can use it like a tablet if I want.
I've never seen anybody actually do that.
But it can be done. It's got HDMI 2.1. It's got 2 USB-C sockets. It's got a micro SD reader. It's got a USB-A port. And I think, I haven't investigated, it's got a slot for a SIM card as well.
Oh, okay, yeah. Dell did used to do SIM cards. They may still do. So that's pretty cool laptop.
I'm going to say this again. It was 140 quid.
It is good.
Now, the battery is hosed, so I get like 90 minutes out of the battery. But that's okay. I can accept that for a 140 quid laptop. That I can just plug in with USB-C and recharge. So that's nice. I have installed a Linux on it. So it's got Fedora 40 on it. using the Plasma Desktop KDE. It took me, I'd say, 45 minutes to get it to an install level where I'm happy with. I've got 1Password password manager. It's got the browser on there that I want. I put Steam on it. I had a game of Slay the Spire and Balatro just to prove that I could do it. So it's good enough to run that kind of game. It didn't get too hot. The fan spun up briefly when it was fine. The only criticism I've got of it, other than the battery, and I can replace the battery, and I'm going to say this, myself for 35 quid. To put it back to where it was when it was a new laptop, myself, just using one screwdriver and pop the thing out, is the Wi-Fi card seems a bit weak. So the proximity to the hotspot might be a factor, but okay. But just as a demonstration, I plugged my Mac's Thunderbolt dock into one of the USB ports on the side of it. It's got an Ethernet adapter on it, and it was just recognised by the installer without any drivers, and just was able to install directly for the Ethernet over a Thunderbolt dock. How impressive is that?
Yeah, that is quite cool. That is cool. But for 140 quid, that's a great device. Most people would be able to buy something like that, do their homework on it, get either Linux or Windows 11 on it, and it will probably work just fine.
Yeah. Obviously, I've got Linux because I don't like the way Microsoft are going in terms of spyware and all the rest of it. This was actually a laptop that Dell sold that was supported by Ubuntu, so they've actually got their own Ubuntu drivers and things for it if you wanted to install a flavor of Linux that was supported by the manufacturer, including the ability to do things like firmware updates and all the rest of it inside of Linux. Now, I don't like Ubuntu because I don't like corporately sponsored things particularly, but if you wanted a bit of hand-holding as a device, you can actually get a major device manufacturer and a major Linux manufacturer, and those two things will go in harmony, and they won't charge you the however much it is for a Windows license if you'd bought that one. It came with Windows on it because it came from a reseller on eBay, but that's gone. And I just think it's really interesting. And like I say, I'm working up the courage to do it, but I think at some point, maybe I'll try and do the month in Linux and just see how that goes.
I think it could be quite interesting. I certainly think if somebody was setting up a company today, if you set up a startup, you could certainly make your life a little bit cheaper by finding some alternative. You could have free versions of Linux, you could go Android, you could probably get Gmail, for business or something similar, and not pay the Microsoft tax, because Microsoft is getting very expensive for these things.
You could run massive relational databases like PostgreSQL instead of things like SQL Server. There's all sorts of open source programming languages like Rust and things like that you can use that are actually secure from the outset rather than Visual Basic and Visual Studio and C#. There's lots of things that you could actually do as alternatives. And quite a lot of the startups we've seen, I bet OpenAI make use of lots of open source tools and not Microsoft tools. I bet it's all written in Python and models that have been developed from other people. So you're absolutely right, you could do that kind of stuff. And if you look at somebody like Marco Arment, who is a PHP developer and happened to use Windows, but he wrote Tumblr on PHP, which is an open source programming language that anybody could have used. So the tools that were there have been there, and I think a lot of startups from that time used the open source tools and community as part of that, and I agree with you. I think you could go places with them. So I'm not going to do it this week. It's at some point for the future, but I wanted to eat my own dog food. Second time I've said that this podcast, and see how the hardware went. But it's not a MacBook Pro. Let's be really clear. I can go away for 14 hours and run off the battery on this thing and do all manner of incredible things. And the screen is amazing on my MacBook Pro. The speakers are amazing on my MacBook Pro, and all that suffers. But it was a tenth of the price.
That is the thing. It's a lot cheaper, and you can swap the battery if you wanted to. You're still probably not going to get 14 hours, but you can swap the battery, which is good, and it's great. It's user serviceable. You can't do that on your Apple device. The cost of just getting into Apple is just so much. It is a shame.
Yeah, I never bought a framework laptop that was a bit more up to date and a bit more comparable to my MacBook Pro. Maybe I'd be telling a different story, but I'm willing to accept all this stuff at the moment for the purposes of learning. And my suspicion is, of what you said a minute ago, that if you were to give this to your kid or a co-worker who wasn't a very demanding computer user with Linux on it, they'd be perfectly happy. They'd fire up a website, they'd get on it, they'd do the job.
Yeah, I think so. I see my kids fire up their laptops, and I just want to go online and play some web-based game. It seems to be the de facto thing.
Yep. So that's enough about that until I come back to it. The second one, and this is just a teaser for what we might do over the rest of the summer, is I've ordered the bare bones of what is going to turn into a new network-attached storage server for me. Another Dell device. I was going to buy a ThinkStation, a Lenovo ThinkStation. My current homemade NAS is built of an old Intel i7 5th generation i7 computer, I think, with hard drives dangling from SATA cables and all that. It doesn't move. It's fine. I mean, I'm not that bothered about it, but it's not ideal. So I've spent a bit more this time. I spent 160 quid this time on a 32 gig Xeon 2200 workstation, which is 5 hot swappable drive bays. And a bunch of SATA. It's actually got SATA for 6 things. It's got 2 NVMe slots. It does DDR4 RAM. It's got enough power to manage the kind of things while still being power efficient when it's in some sort of idle mode. So I'm gradually going to build that up over the next couple of weeks into an absolute kick-ass, probably NAS server. I might install my virtualization thing, Proxmox, on it as well, and actually pass through hard disks and run TrueNAS through that. But that's a decision to make at that point. But again, for not a lot of money, you can get up and running. I suspect I'm going to have an 18 terabytes, server on here with redundant ZFS file systems and all the rest of it for not a lot of money. That'll run off a 2.5 gig or 10 gig Ethernet port. I've still got to buy disks to put in it, or I might transition the disks that are already in one of my existing devices. But it's not a lot of money to get started with, and it's not difficult to do. So I might try and document that. And so if the listeners are interested and want to do this kind of things themselves, I'll show them how to do that.
Wow. You've got a busier summer than I have planned, I think.
I've been on holiday already. I've got to do something with my time.
There is that. I've got a holiday coming up, so we are in slightly different places. Maybe when I come back from holiday, I'll come up with a project as well. But fair play to you. You're certainly going to get a lot more in the weeds than what I would entertain.
Yep. There you go. That's my thoughts for the main show.
It is interesting how you're going the non-corporate route with some of your experiments. It'd be interesting to see how it pans out. I like to see you use Linux and Android for a month. That'd be
Sounds like a challenge.
Sound like a challenge. I don't think I could do it. I think I'd just get too frustrated with it. But I would be impressed to see whether you could do it. And I guess the big thing is that you wouldn't have the whole connected ecosystem piece.
Yeah, all right. I mean, that sounds like a challenge. Am I allowed to record the podcast on my Mac, or do we need to do that too?
That's your call. You've got to do the work, so that is 100% your decision. I'd be comfortable if you recorded the podcast on the Mac because we know it all works and it's all set up. And we've got a good workflow.
Yeah, okay. I'll think about that. Anything else for main show?
No, I don't think so. For me, sadly, I haven't been doing any projects. Life has been busy in my house, with the Euros and family life. So apologies, I've not got any cool stuff to discuss.
I don't watch football. I got plenty of time. App of the week, Orca Desktop, made by a company called Mac Stadium. Mac Stadium are a Mac server provider if you want apps that run specifically on Macs. They used to have a host of Mac Minis. Some were in America that were all backed up and redundant. If there was that particular application you want to run on a Mac, you'd go to Mac Stadium. You'd be able to lease a bit of space off them, either processor or storage space, and then have your Mac apps run from them. They've released a virtualization tool. It's on GitHub. You can download it. It's called Orca Desktop. Download it, run it on your Mac. If you click Start, it will download an IPSW of macOS Sonoma, I think, whatever the most up-to-date version of that is, relatively quickly depending on the speed of your interconnection, and you've got a virtual Mac running really, really quickly. You can configure it with all the things you'd expect in a virtualization environment, screen size, amount of memory, all that good stuff, storage space. And then they're reproducible, and you can pass them on to other Mac users, and it's just quite nice. It lacks some professional features for me, but if what you're looking for is almost a click and go to be able to virtualize a Mac on your Mac, this is a great way to go. And I think with the changes Apple's announced with the virtualization layers, where, for example, iCloud, you'll be able to sign into in a virtualized Mac, come Sequoia, when that's, if I've said that, and later versions of Mac, this is going to be really useful. And if you're a Mac developer, having a redundant machine, you can return it to a known state of at any point. I think this is a really useful thing. Or you just want to be super private on your Mac as you use it. So Orca Desktop, nice little tool.
Cool. Okay, that sounds good. And it does make sense, like you say, having that backup Mac. For me, I've gone with AdBlock Pro is my thing of the week. It's on Mac and iOS. It's all right. Sometimes it doesn't always work, and you've just got to go turn off content blockers because some sites detect it. But on the whole, fantastic little tool just for turning off here in the EU cookie pop-ups, any adverts. It just takes all that out, and it's meant to make your life a little bit quicker as well because obviously you're not downloading all those adverts. Seems pretty good, well maintained. I can't remember what I paid, but it's not a lot for the subscription, so I would recommend.
I'm a big fan of ad blockers. I run 2 levels of ad blocker. I've obviously got an internal one inside a network, which I think is AdGuard. I forget actually the name of it. I can go and look it up. If you give me 2 seconds, I'll tell you what that is. Yeah, it's AdGuard Home, which is an open source project where you can run on a little server or Docker container or something like that. You point your router at the Docker container and it will block all ads across your network, not just on one device like this. So for a family, I'd thoroughly recommend, if you've got a Raspberry Pi or something like that kicking around, or you have got a machine that stays on all the time, you should run AdGuard Home as a Docker container. Point your router as the DNS record for that, and it just protects your whole house then. It can be a bit wife unfriendly from time to time, or child unfriendly from time to time, because it will block some shopping sites and scammy things, but I view that as just part of the price. They shouldn't be going to those sites anyway. So I run that. So that's on a network level, and then for Firefox, certainly I have another ad blocker built into that, so when I'm out and about in the world I can also have ad blocker. So these are good things. Many of them are free. Things like AdGuard are free. But yeah, you should absolutely run something like this on your device.
I actually paid £40 for AdBlock Pro for a lifetime subscription. I thought that seems okay, but you can do yearly for a tenner. So I thought that seems pretty good.
Yep, and many of these services are free, as have been said, but it's definitely worth getting something. You don't realize how many ads you get served until you install one of these blockers.
Yeah, until they aren't displayed to you, or you see a log of all the things that it's blocked to make your browsing a bit quicker. So that would be my recommendation.
Great. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
I think so. So if anybody wants to get in contact with us, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I'm at _CGP at mastodon.social. You can watch it on YouTube at wakefromsleep.com and click on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.